People have all sorts of funny notions about what they have a right to. Go ahead, ask any dumbass walking down the street about what they think they and their fellow Americans have a right to. Among the many rights that I haven't thought of, you'll find out that Americans, if not anyone in the world, have a right to equal health care, equal food, equal education, equal housing, equal internet access, equal telephone service, equal cable TV, equal time on TV and radio, equal bad art by minorities, and on and on. In fact, you can convince 50% of adult Americans, the 50% making the bottom half of the money, about a right to have just about anything in an equal manner to the other 50%, if you ask the question in a directing enough manner. So among the flurry of all these made-up rights, it's only natural that the real rights get lost in the noise. Indeed, a thoughtful high schooler might say, since those real rights were enunciated and promulgated so long ago, they've had their time and it's time to give all the other rights their due hearing. Well, it ain't that simple, friend. No, the freemen are going to have a say on a right that has not been respected for quite some time. The right to equal justice. The right to equal justice. What? Surely that's not one of the old rights lost. Sure, we all know the right to keep and bear arms and the right against arbitrary search and seizure are under assault or dead. But the right to equal justice, and where is that right mentioned anyway? Is that in the Sixth Amendment? A right to a fair and speedy trial by a jury of one's peers? It is, sort of. It is an implied assumption by the founders that by describing the constitutional mechanics of the American legal system, that the inherent result is equal justice for its citizens. It's only fair to say that given the ambiguity in some of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, ambiguities which have led to the wholesale overrunning of any semblance of that original right, that the founders were a bit naive. And that is no fault of their own. We only see so far today because we stand on the shoulders of giants. In fact, at this point in time, I would have to think long and hard about how to word an amendment or document that guarantees each and every American citizen a right to equal justice. A document that wouldn't be corrupted or twisted by scheming politicians and their enablers, the lawyers, in the future. But rest assured, that document will exist at some point in the near future, like an iron weight on the heads of quite a few. So while I cannot lay out a sufficient description of the right to equal justice at this time, I can tell you without a doubt a necessary condition for it. The lawyers must be brought under control. They are the whores, pimps, and pushers of a free market legal system. And a free market is a fair, efficient, and desirable method to apportion just about anything but justice. Do you understand? We live today in a nation, a society, where everything else is regulated to equality based on some asinine notion of a right, except justice. Where we live today, you are entitled to as much justice as you can afford, and so many can afford so much more justice than you. What a concept! As much justice as you can afford, and this intolerable system of where only the wealthy can afford to buy their justice is a sore festering. You see, a nation without equal justice for all is not a nation at all. It is a racket, and the freemen are going to bring the hammer down on this free market whorehouse called our legal system. Take the area of criminal prosecution. We have a system for revenue generation and political career building. The fodder for this machinery are the citizenry, Virtually every prosecutor office from coast to coast, regardless of whether elected or appointed, is headed by an aspiring politician. The prosecutor for the government is not interested in finding the truth. He is only interested in his win-loss record. And he commands a vast array of resources to overwhelm the individual who is unfortunate enough to become snared in the legal system. The favored weapon of the prosecutor is the plea bargain. The plea bargain is simply an extortion by the prosecutor to gain an easy win. These thugs actually compete with one another to get the highest conviction rates in order to make the plea bargain the only sane choice for any accused individual. The accused has the choice of paying tens of thousands of dollars to another parasite lawyer, only to be likely convicted, or take a lesser punishment and admit guilt, regardless of whether one is guilty or not. Every day, thousands of innocent people make this simple, self-preserving calculation to survive, with some of their skin still intact. This extorted plea system is what allows these courts to be the extensive revenue generators that they are. It is in the state's interest to extort as many people as possible to quickly plead guilty in exchange for probation and fines, and to find new victims to cycle through the ringer. The overwhelming resources of the state versus the meager resources of the accused is what allows this corrupt machine to crank away smoothly. Of course, the wealthy are virtually immune to this coercive system. The only time a wealthy individual takes a plea bargain is because they are actually guilty, and sometimes not even then. In order to see that justice gets its due hearing, the plea system will have to be eradicated. With the ending of this system, the courts will grind to a halt as cases overwhelm the apparatus, and thus criminal prosecutions will decrease, and more people who did not need to be bothered in the first place will not have to tangle with the system. In effect, the courts and the police system will have no choice but to focus on real crime, as opposed to revenue generation. On the civil side, things are no better. On one side, we have a population aided by gluttonous ambulance chasers that sues for virtually any incident, and on the other we have a corporate lawyer pool that ensures its employers' advantages by drafting legislation that allow them to run over the citizens' consumer and property rights. Only if the target is wealthy will the individual get any legal help towards their case, with the lawyer taking half their justice in payment in the end. And while corporations may pay millions to their lawyers to allow them to dump toxic waste into people's backyards and drinking water, and allow them legislated monopolies that defraud the consumer, and the common pathogen in all this corruption and foolishness is that parasite, the lawyer. It becomes obvious that the lawyer is a parasite, producing nothing of real value, and it is best to simply sweep these parasites into a common holding area where we can keep an eye on them, laugh at them, and harass them. And that pig pen is the state. You see, the state is evil and a parasite itself. It is a necessary evil, though, as we are not anarchists. But like anything that is necessary yet dangerous, it should be kept locked up and under supervision, and derided as often as possible, and regulated. Socializing the liars. But wouldn't making all lawyers government employees and paying them crappy wages necessarily cause the best and brightest, and I tend to disagree with that description, to not become lawyers and leave us with a group of underachieving civil serpents? Yes, and that is what we want. You see, in the system of as much justice as you can afford, the real problem of injustice comes about because of unevenly matched arrays of lawyers. One side has the politically driven army of prosecutors, complete with lying police, corrupt labs, etc., or the $1 Million Dream Team, while the other side has one mediocre community college dope. And just as in any other competition, whether it be ping pong or war, it is the inequality of sides that produces the massacre. If you put a heavyweight boxer against another heavyweight, you get a fight. If you put a heavyweight against a 12-year-old, you get a death. So yes, we want equally below average dull lawyer minds opposing each other in court. And that is where we will find the most equal justice that is practically possible. One mediocrity versus another, each side having only one. Your lawyer randomly assigned to you is a state employee, as is Exxon's one lawyer assigned to them. The financial resources of either side should and must be irrelevant. They must be equally represented in court by equally mediocre people. It should be plainly obvious that this is a practical path to equal justice for all. In addition to the inherent fairness of making lawyers civil servants, the transformation of their class into a mediocre pool of individuals helps prevent against political meddling. An inherent trait of economic elites is a natural tendency to try to convert some of their financial success into political clout. The lawyer is the worst case of this tendency. The lawyer, in addition to being a wealthy class of individuals, deem that they are the most suited to political responsibility and power, because after all they are the experts on the law. And what laws we have today! An intertwined, jumbled mess of contradicting laws, uneven standards, and wonkish mush, all written in an indecipherable alien speak known as legalese. They claim laws and contracts must be written in such a way because of legal rigor. Actually, it is simply a way to preserve their monopoly over the writing of laws and contracts by preventing the average citizen from understanding the document. So one ought to be able to see the multiple benefits of bringing the lawyer class under control and regulation. We remove an incessant and ubiquitous parasite from the everyday costs of society, and we reach ever closer to an ideal justice for all. The lawyers will squeal and shout. They will threaten as much as any flabby, pasty, spectacled group of wimps can threaten. They will write endless articles on the virtue of their parasite class. They'll even try to sue. But when this nation is reformed, the lawyer will be socialized and put in his proper place, somewhere between road repair crews and traffic cops. Because justice cannot be a commodity for sale to the highest bidder.